Okay, so we're diving into chapter 1 of the book This Is Why You Dream by Rahul Jandial. Jandial, sorry if I'm botching that name. Um, this chapter is called We Have Evolved to Dream, and it's fairly long. Most of the chapters are fairly long, so I won't get through all of it. I'll go through about the first 3 or 4 sections of the chapter. So I'm going to read passages, respond to some of them, and add some of my own thoughts and opinions. This chapter, or this, what we'll be going through today, is on the grander subject of how we have evolved to dream, about the dream and the brain, like what's happening in the brain while we are dreaming, what creates the dreaming mind, how even dreams have rules. So, like the rules of dreams, which, anyways, it's more so about the commonalities of dreams amongst cultures, different cultures, and the social and emotional power of dreams. So, that is the last section we're going to go through, and stick around till the end because that's when it's going to get really hot. The social and emotional power of dreams is one of my favorite subjects about dreaming. It's basically my focus in the world of dreams. There's a lot of different focuses in the world of dreams. You could be a dream therapist, you could be a dream researcher, like in a lab, like him or the people he references. You can come from it from a point of neuroscience, like he is, and you can be an artist, a dream artist. You can do your art from dreams. I'm specifically focused and interested in the cultural impact of dreaming and the social impact of dreaming. And so the last part of this, the mid part of this chapter / the last part of this video is going to really highlight that, and it's really interesting. So I'm not just saying it, stick around till the end because we're just going to get more and more interesting as we go along. So let's begin. So he's starting this chapter talking about a type of brain surgery he does while his patient is awake. And so basically, like, they don't, of course they're not feeling any pain, but they're able to have a conscious response and a conscious experience of this person, of the doctor, prodding their brain, which stimulates certain electrical impulses in the brain. And so, based on like what they're seeing in the electrical impulses of the brain, plus the person's actual like conscious response, like this is what I'm experiencing, they're able to see that when they poke essentially different parts of the brain, it will stimulate conscious experiences for the patient, like memories, which is crazy interesting. But also, some parts of the brain that they poke will have a spontaneous inducement of a nightmare. So he's talking about, here I'll read. With this surgery, the patient is conscious and alert, yet feels no pain because the brain has no pain receptors. Really? Oh, that's crazy. But the electricity has an effect. Every brain is unique, and some spots I touch come alive. Touch one spot, and the patient reports a childhood memory. Touch another, and the patient smells a lemon. Crazy. Touch a third, and the patient feels sadness, embarrassment, or even desire. Wild. And so, side point, the purpose of this is to find a place where the brain, there's no like they don't feel anything, and then they know that that's where they can make an incision to like do a surgery. Anyway, so while stimulating the outermost layer, the cerebral cortex, a few millimeters at a time during awake brain surgeries, I have sparked bizarre and profound experiences in patients. In fact, nightmares can be triggered by electrical stimulation. Remove the probe's current from a certain ridge on the surface of the brain and a nightmare ends. Return the electricity to the same spot and the exact nightmare returns. Recurrent nightmares are now understood to be self-sustaining loops of electrical activity that replay the experience of terror. Very interesting. This next sentence I don't necessarily agree with, but let me read. In this incontestable way, my craft has answered one of humanity's original questions: where do dreams come from? I can say with certainty that dreams arise from our brains, and specifically our brain's electrical activity. So this to me is, I don't totally I don't agree. I mean, I don't not agree with that. Certainly, obviously, like unarguably, like dreams can be measured in brain activity, but and the brain dreams and memories can even be triggered by triggering the brain in certain ways. But I feel like the answer is too simple, like to say that dreams come from the brain's electrical activity, just because they're associated alongside with and can be measured by brain's electrical activity doesn't mean that that's where they come from. I feel like it's too simple of an answer. It's like being like, where do the lights in my house come from? And someone being like, they come from electricity. And it's like, yes, and where does electricity come from? Like, does it just come from nowhere? So I feel like that's the next, it's like, yeah, okay, so it's from the brain, and then if you go a step deeper, it's from the electricity in the brain. And then there's like, that's just, I feel like that's not a finality for me. That's not like a satisfying finality. There's way more. That just like leads to more questions about electricity and the nature of electricity and the nature of light and the nature of creation and consciousness and et cetera, et cetera. So that was a very strongly worded sentence that I would not agree with. I agree with almost everything in this book, and I think it's so well written. There's so many parts that just like, I'm like, oh, those are the words I've been wanting to iterate for so long, and you put them into words, and I'm so happy. But that is one of the parts that doesn't really I don't really go for. So yeah, electricity, light, electricity. Where does the light come from? How do we see with the lights off? How do we have inner light? What's electricity? And again, it's this kind of thing where it presupposes that consciousness kind of starts and ends with the brain, and I don't. That's not of my personal. That's not really what I. That's not my opinion. I think consciousness, that like phenomenons of consciousness, like he's talking about dreaming, memory, emotions can certainly, obviously, incontestably be measured by the brain and brain activity and be studied and be understood through that lens. But I don't agree that that's the beginning and end to our conscious experience. It's to my belief slash opinion slash research slash direct personal experience that consciousness does not rely on the brain for its existence. But let's go on. I will make an off-topic point though, because he says in the next sentence, of course we now know all consciousness is powered by electricity, including dreaming, which is another proof that electricity is free and everywhere and is available to be harnessed freely. Another topic for another day. Okay. Okay, so this is a great point. This is something I think I made a shorter video. Yeah, I made a short little video on this on my Instagram. But so he's saying that, speaking of electricity in the brain and measuring electrical currents in the brain while dreaming, the electrical intensity and patterns measured during certain stages of sleep look nearly identical to when we are awake. Moreover, the amount of energy certain regions of your brain burn while dreaming can exceed that which they burn while we're awake, particularly in the emotional and visual centers of the brain. That means that dreams can achieve an emotional intensity that is not biologically possible in our waking lives. In fundamental ways, you are never more alive than when you're dreaming. Bam. So awesome. That is such a fire like thing to be able to prove like something that you've directly experienced before but never thought it was like but thought it was like totally anecdotal, and then to be able to read it and be like, no, that's actually like a total fact, measurable fact. Yes. So awesome. Anyone who is a dreamer, who tracks their dreams, who has even had only a couple dreams in their life that they remember, will probably agree with this sentence. And now it's a fact that actually, just in the measure of your brain alone, you are more emotionally stimulated in your sleep than you could ever be when you're awake. So get into it. Like if you're like a life positive person, you're like, I love life and I want to experience as much of life as possible and the most intensity possible, even if it's negative. Like, I'm not afraid of that. I want to experience life to the fullest. If you're one of those people, if you've ever said that sentence and you are not paying attention to your dreams, here's your invitation to start, because I believe very, very much that if you really want to live life to the fullest, you've got to include dreaming in that. And here's your proof right now that that's not just my opinion. That's a fact. Sick. Anyways, let's move on. There are some people who claim that they never dream. In reality, virtually everyone dreams, though not everyone remembers. True. We do not choose to dream. We need to dream. So interesting. Just going, and I'll touch on this more later, but that's wild. Like, basically, he's saying, and he says this in other parts of the book, that he's like, I don't think sleep is as much about recovery and restoration of our bodies as much as it's about having the experience of dreams. Like, the need to dream is actually the higher purpose of sleep, because, and he argues that because when we're asleep, like, our bodies are like, well, I mean, our muscles are paralyzed, our bodies are like pretty close to dead. Like, we're having just like a few things, like we're breathing, our blood is circulating, but all the energy that is measured when we're sleeping is in our brains. So he's like, why would sleep be about the body? It's about the brain. The brain is what's going off. So that's, I mean, God, I could get into that for so long. I'll bring this up later on in this video. But let's just read that again. We do not choose to dream. We need to dream. Dreaming is technology for survival. And this has been seen, like, this is more so something you might say that was more relevant in more archaic days when, like, oh yeah, we need to dream so that we can, because in dreaming we could do things like predict the weather or see if there was, like a warring tribe coming to us, like seeking danger, seeking plots, like making deals with the animals that we kill to sustain ourselves. All of these things that seem almost magical and that technology has taken the place of in our modern life, we're like, oh, well, dreams were technology for survival, like for early humans, but now we kind of have that covered. And this is kind of proof that that's not true. Beyond their like utility in ways we can see in our waking world, there is an inherent need for dreaming for the survival of our body, which is just crazy. It's so interesting. And you can see that, I mean, just even if you didn't know anything about science, you could just infer that from the fact that all humans dream. It's built into our hardware and our software. And like he said, it's not something we choose to do. It's something we automatically do. So it is automatically part of our human condition as alive in bodies. So you could just from that fact alone, you could infer that we need to dream for our survival. But this is just more proof to that, which is really exciting. There's something in my eye. If we are sleep deprived, the first thing we catch up on is dreaming. That's very interesting. I did not know that. If we've had enough sleep but are dream deprived, we will immediately start dreaming as soon as we fall asleep. Even when sleep is impossible, vivid dreams can emerge. Among people with fatal familial insomnia, a rare and lethal genetic disease that makes sleep impossible, the need to dream is so strong that dreams escape into the day. Dreaming is essential. So whether you like it or not, whether you can sleep or not, you're going to dream no matter what. That has so many effing implications. It just makes my mind spin. I won't even start to rant about it right now because we have too much to get through, but like, wow. If that doesn't make your wheels spin, I don't know what will. Also, that disease sounds like the absolute worst fate I've ever heard of in my life. I don't know if this is this exact same thing, but I read I read something somewhere about like a very rare disease where like to fall asleep, this certain like gate in your brain needs to close, needs to shut. And there's a very rare disease where that just doesn't happen. Like no matter how much morphine you take, no matter how much like drugs you're induced with to try to get you to sleep, like you will not sleep. And if you don't sleep, your body will slowly shut down and you will die, but it takes like a year. And so like I just like honestly like when you're sick, when you have any other disease or sickness like or injury and you're healing, like sleep is really like the only like break you really get from that. And like you're like, oh, you finally get a break from like your suffering, and this you don't get that break. It's not I don't think I've ever heard of anything worse, honestly. It sounds so horrible. Anyways, let's move on. And now he's saying that, like, now he's just going into how, like, if you add up the amount of time we spend sleeping and dreaming, it said that just in REM sleep alone, it's about 2 hours a night dreaming. But from personal experience, I'm sure you know this from your own personal experience, dreaming occurs at all sleep stages, not just REM sleep at all. So, and he even says that. He says this may be a gross underestimate. And they are finding more so that dreaming is possible at any stage of sleep. And that means it's quite possible we spend almost a third of our lives dreaming. 1/3 of your life. Again, for anybody who says that they're like, I love life, I want to experience as much life as I can and live as fully as possible, but they're not exploring their dreams, they're not remembering their dreams, then better get started. Because like if you're not remembering your dreams and not exploring them, you're missing a third of your life. A third of your life. That's a lot. What if someone was like, I'm gonna, like what if you were sent to jail for a third of your life? You would be like, holy shit, I almost missed a third of my life, not really, but or like if someone was more so if you were like put in a coma or whatever, you get the point. Like if you really want to live life for your fullest, if you want, how about life extension? Everyone's like obsessed with life extension and like living as long as possible and longevity. It's like you want longevity, get into the experiences you're having during sleep. Keep living while you're sleeping. You're doing it anyways. You don't even need to try to do anything. All you need to do is get into a very simple practice of writing your dreams down and exploring them a little, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm conscious, because you are living your dreams anyways, but it's just subconscious. If you want to consciously really live your life to the fullest, then you got to include dreams in it. That's my opinion. So yeah, again, I guess I'll repeat myself for the 1,000th time, but you really want to live life to the fullest, and that's really like what your goal is like full potential and longevity and full experience, you got to do the dreaming. Um, Especially like how we said earlier, like how he said earlier, that when we're dreaming, we're having experiences that are even more vivid and more lifelike than we could have biologically have possible when you're awake. So again, in both quantity and quality, if you really are passionate about life, you've got to have a dreaming practice. It's very obvious to me. It's my opinion, but very obvious to me. Anyways, okay. He ends this section of the chapter by saying, maybe it's not sleep we really need, but dreams. I have a lot to say about this. Obviously, like, I agree. The commentary I had on this was, again, like, I could talk for forever, and there's just so much more I know I'm going to learn, new information that I'm going to learn in the years to come that will make me have even way more to say about this. But for now, let's do some storytelling. Maybe it's not sleep we really need, but dreams. In archaic traditions, in the most archaic traditions, people lived very closely to their mythology. And when I say they live closely to their mythology, it's not I don't mean just in rituals and big events like birthdays or initiations. I mean to every mundane detail. So the understanding is that when one reenacts a mythical storyline, they are not just honoring it in a conceptual way, they are actually contemporaneously living in that myth. They are bringing that myth onto Earth in that moment and living in its timeline, which is nonlinear. So every time one reenacts a myth to its most accurately, one is stepping in to the nonlinear timeline of mythology and living in that way. So our most archaic indigenous ancestors designed every part of their lives to be based on their mythologies. So again, not just birthdays and celebrations, but like the way they gather their food, the way they hunt, the way they sleep, the way they speak their languages. So every detail of their waking lives was based and designed around their mythologies, so as much time as possible in their waking lives would be within a non-linear time space. And for them, this is essential for their mental well-being. It's like this, like, and it's, I would say it was like, and it still is, like, we haven't changed from that. We just have, our non-linear spaces have just been like totally co-opted by garbage, but that'll go on a tangent. Let me try to stay focused. This was essential. So we can say then that if we put dreams in mythology, which of course they are, like, there's so much connection between dreams and mythology. In many cultures, dreaming and the mythic world are one. That it is all, like in traditional cultures from Mexico, it's all the dreaming. The underworld, the afterlife, the mythological timeline, and where we go when we dream is all the dreaming. That's how what I resonate with also. That's so for them, when they're calling down the mythical timeline, when they're calling down their mythical stories in every action that they do, they're calling down the nonlinear timeline and living contemporaneously with their myth in the nonlinear timeline. Basically, they're living in the dreaming timeline. The dreaming is also nonlinear. So for our most archaic ancestors, and for us still, and it's probably a different tangent, another tangent for another day, so I'll do that later, but the point is, experiencing going into a nonlinear space like we do when we dream is essential for our not only well-being but survival. How or why, I could like I could have a conversation about for a long time. If anybody wants to have a conversation about that, let me know. It's very niche, but so that sentence just made me think of that. Is like, to me, I don't like the why about that goes into like realms of like mystery and spirituality and really interesting things, but I'll also just say that it wasn't only their like our most archaic ancestors. It's not just their everyday routines, but like designing their days to fit the nonlinear timeline, but also they design their identities to be within the nonlinear space also. So initiation rites, specifically the example I read about was in specific Aboriginal Australian tribe where young men go out and through a process of initiation, that's either a vision quest, so receiving a vision, receiving a dream, or being put through an mythological reenactment that's set up by the whole tribe and lasts a bunch of days and is actually like really traumatic and crazy, and you step into a waking dream because you're stepping back into a myth because they're bringing down the nonlinear timeline and reenacting it with you and for you, and you're the main character and you have to go through your hero's journey. The whole purpose of that is to basically psychologically refocus young men away from like wanting to fuck or fight everything and anything, and to feeling a role of social responsibility and protection and providing for the tribe. And so the way that they do this is by through those initiation processes, they're psychologically reoriented towards these things, and they gain a new identity, and that identity is often associated with the eternal world or the nonlinear timeline. Either by they may be identified with a particular ancestor or a particular mythological like archetype or character, and they get a new name. And so not only this goes hand in hand with psychologically reorienting away from fighting and fucking, because those are very temporary things. They're temporary pleasures that lead to very finite ends. But focus on protection and sustaining of the tribe is towards infinite and eternal ends. And so by identifying, getting an identity that's with an eternal energy, an ancestor or a character or something like that, you are identified with the eternal world, and therefore your actions in this world will be guided by and for eternity. You are already in eternity, and that's what you're living for. This is the sustainable way of life, obviously, and it gives you a sense of purpose beyond just your finite life, and it gives you a sense of belonging beyond just your finite two parents and like siblings, wherein your father is the sky and your mother is the earth and your siblings are all the plants and animals and brothers and sisters of the earth in general. And so you see then that this creates a far more healthy and far more sustainable way of life. So maybe it's not about sleep, but it's about dreams and dreams as so much more than just tiny little loops of trying to understand our small lives. Dreams as much more than that. Dreams as eternity, dreams as mythology, dreams as the collective mind of all things, dreams as like total divinity.